I am your brother in Christ, and welcome back. We are going to be hitting this topic again, mostly because it hit the short I did on this topic hit 100,000 views. So this was the first one on this channel to hit it. Hey, welcome. Welcome, everyone. So we'll go ahead and just play the videos, examine what they say, and then take a look at what the Quran and the Hadith have to say about it. This is an open call-in, so at any time, anyone is more than welcome to join, give their opinions, give their thoughts. Mostly looking for Muslims to give me their ideas on this, see if they can try to poke holes in the logic I present. So let's go ahead and dive on into the first one. Now, I made this first one just as part of the long series I did on just issues within the Quran. So this one I did not think was going to be such a big deal or something that stood out, but it was one that was getting a lot of traction. So then I went ahead and broke it down even deeper. So let's watch the original first and see what it says.
On near, and the moon has split. Quran 54, 1 through 2. The hour has drawn near, and the moon has split in two. Yet, whenever they see a sign, they turn away, saying some magic of old. In this verse, we are seeing that Muhammad claims to have split the moon in two because of the power of Allah. To demonstrate to the unbelievers, this didn't happen. There's no historical evidence. There's no record of it. If the moon actually did split in two, be cleaved in half, people would have noticed. People all around the world would have seen this miraculous sign, and then the moon being put back together. There would have been reports about this. There would have been no way for someone to have covered this up. Next time that someone says that there is miraculous historical evidence that supports Muhammad's claims and the Quran.
So that was the first one we have there. So that was the first one I made, and then people kept responding to it, kept viewing it. So I was like, okay, well, we'll revisit this. We'll break it down a bit more and turn it in there. Turn it into three separate shorter videos where I look a bit more into it. So people kept pointing in the comments there, oh, there's this NASA article. There's this NASA article. You know, if you go and read this NASA article, it will be clear to you that this is what it means, and this is proof, because NASA has confirmed that the moon split in the 6th century. So I went ahead and read it, and this was the video. I had to split it up into two different shorts. We'll go through both of them.
54, 1 through 2 claims that the moon has been split, and many Muslims claim that NASA has proven that the moon was split in two. But is that true? The ridges found by NASA that the Muslims are referring to are lobate scarps. Lobate scarps are caused by the cooling and shrinking of the moon, not the moon being split. The youngest lobate scarp is 100 million years according to NASA. In that article that the Muslims are referring to, Muslims claim that Muhammad witnessed the splitting of the moon in the 6th century. This is a little bit of a discrepancy of dates, give or take 99 million years. Next time.
So yeah, so that's the article they were pointing to, saying, see, this proves that the Quran is true. You see, NASA has confirmed it. I look at it saying, no, NASA is not saying the moon ever actually split. These are caused by the cooling and shrinking of the moon. It caused these little ripples. And also part 2 to that one.
54, 1 through 2 claims that the moon has been split, and many Muslims claim that NASA has proven that the moon was split in two. The ridges found by NASA that the Muslims are referring to are lobate scarps. If this was evidence that Allah split the moon, then we would only find lobate scarps on the moon. This is not the case. We find them on multiple other moons around other planets, as well as Mercury, where the lobate scarps are over a mile high. So the claim that the lobate scarps are proof of Allah splitting the moon is rather ridiculous. Next time.
So that would be the entire 3 parts. Now I did do examining the history of it, because people kept mentioning, oh, look, there's these monks in England. They saw the moon split. Now the problem is they're in the 12th century, not the 6th. So a bit of a discrepancy there. Let's ask Elon Musk right now that I was actually trying to click on the other one about the moon trip. Sure, go ahead. Ask him. So again, this is an open call-in. You guys are welcome to join me on here live. Just let me know what your opinions are. The link is pinned there for you guys to easily click on it and join up. So those were the shorts that I had, and we had some pretty interesting comments from that. We'll go ahead and take on some of those in just a second. Let me tab on over to it. Actually, it's this one right here. That was the one that got so many comments on it itself. We don't need proof from Mohammed. So this is the most popular one under the pinned one about today's live stream. It says we do not need proof from NASA. We believe every single word our beloved prophet from our beloved prophet. Again, that's called blind faith. Definitely when this is stated to be a sign for the unbelievers, and me as an unbeliever looks at this and says, I don't seem to see this. It does not seem to be here. Where did it go? If this is proof, then I should be able to see this proof. If that's the point, that why Allah did this. So let's see here. So a couple more. It seems to be mostly along this same line. It's not the eyes that are blind, but the hearts. No, in this case, considering most people, like the comment earlier said, everyone was sleeping from Breakfast Gun. Everyone was sleeping at the night. Everyone was sleeping at night, so no witnesses. That is a common claim by Muslims that everyone at that time period was just happened to be sleeping while this event occurred. The problem with that is time zones, different times, and a lot of the people could have seen this occurring. There's no way that everyone else in the world was sleeping all at the exact same time and they could not see this event happening. In fact, we have entire cultures whose main point is to look up at the stars, who believe that the heavenly hosts up there, the stars in the sky, were actually divine in some regard. And if the biggest thing in the sky happened to split all of a sudden, it would be a pretty big indicator that something was going on. So, yeah, that would not, everyone's sleeping. No. I know he's just quoting something there, but again, it would be the claim that the eyes were blind.
I can't believe I'm in.
Nope.
Quran 54, 1 through.
Doesn't want to go through my list here. So, bro graduated from KFC menu. Okay, so at least that one's a bit more. At least it's creative. It's not the typical insult or anything like that. It's an actual creative comment. So I'll give him that. And here we go, David S. Welcome.
Hello.
Have you been watching so far?
No, I haven't seen anything yet. I'll have to catch up.
We've just gone through the videos. We went through the comments on some of them, pointing it out. I also have the Hadith still to go through. I'm hoping that we get some Muslims here that actually believe this event occurred, because I would love to see their opinion in this. So what is your thoughts on this? If you want, I can pull up the video and just play it, let you see it first.
You know what? I actually want to see the video because the fact that you have the Quran verse there is one of the most important parts. And keeping in mind the necessary literal interpretation of the Quran, that it must literally be interpreted literally as it is, literally. And just remembering that before you play that, just everybody that's watching and anyone that's listening later, Remember that this is the eternal speech of Allah, which means it is his eternal wisdom, which means that what he's saying is not metaphorical, because that would mean that he's speaking falsely before creation happened, right? He's speaking without reference for things that aren't actually true, which means he's speaking falsely. So he's speaking literally without any simile or metaphor whatsoever. Now that I've said that, let's give it a check. Also, hello everybody. Hello.
Yes, you seem to be a fan favorite.
Yeah, right
Everyone
on.
saying hi. So, yes, and one additional thing to say from this is POV. So, point of view. Whose point of view is this? You have to ask that about the Bible because there are different authors in the Bible, different writing styles. Who's writing it? Who's it for? What's the point of this? In the Quran, the only person's point of view is Allah because he is the acclaimed to be the author itself.
That's right. That's right. And
So-
Muslims make that a point. They will say, you Christians have a book written by man, but we have one which is directly written by God. And I'm like, that's great. That leads to some issues. So eternally written, eternally thought,
eternally written.
Always, forever, unchangeably, which means this has always been his perspective, which is really interesting. It's not phenomenological. Any Muslim in the chat, whoever says, oh, this was written from the perspective of Muhammad. No, because then you throw away all of Islam. This is the eternal speech and wisdom and mind of Allah from his perspective from eternity. Interesting.
Absolutely. So here is, now this is the second one that I went back to examining actually what NASA said about this alleged event. So actually, let's start with part 1, which is the original that I did. So add that on.
54, 1 through 2. The hour has drawn near, and the moon has split in two. Yet, whenever they see a sign, they turn away, saying some magic of old. In this verse, we are seeing that Muhammad claims to have split the moon in two because of the power of Allah. To demonstrate to the unbelievers, this didn't happen. There's no historical evidence. There's no record of it. If the moon actually did split in two, be cleaved in half, people would have noticed. People all around the world would have seen this miraculous sign, and then the moon being put back together. There would have been reports about this. There would have been no way for someone to have covered this up. Next time that someone says that there is...
So yeah, so if this would have actually have occurred and we would have massive notes from historians outside of the Islamic world saying this happened, this event happened. Okay, that's something to go on. I can examine that, and that would look like credible evidence that Islam is true.
Yeah, and again, to go along with what you're saying, if they're claiming that everything is literally directly actually true in the Quran, there's no metaphor, there's no symbolism or anything, but it's actually literally true, which it has to be. It's the mind of Allah. Then what that means is that this has to be a historical event, right? So now, of course, a Muslim who doesn't know anything about the Bible could say, well, isn't there a part in the Bible where the sun stops in the sky? And I would say, well, number one, we're actually able to account for that, right? Because this is actually phenomenological language from the perspective of the writer themselves, who is not God, but Joshua in that case, right? So we can actually use genre, literary analysis, the way that people spoke about battles that they were going to win, and symbolism and poetic language they would use to describe battles that were in their hands. We could use that from the ancient world to explain what's being meant by this. But again, you cannot use those claims against us if we have different beliefs about our books. We have fundamentally different beliefs about our books, so you cannot use the same claims we use against you back on us. Just want to make that clear because you know how Muslims are. So
yes, I've got that comment. Yeah. It's like, okay, again, that's why earlier on I said, okay, point of view. Who is saying this? Whose point of view? Because if this is coming from God himself, then he should be all-knowing. He shouldn't make such incredibly simple, stupid mistakes. So this is now part 2. So that one got a lot of traction. I said, okay, Muslims seem to care about this. I mean, out of all the hills to die on, this one, okay. If you want to pick this as your fight, okay, I'll go there with you. I mean, I'm not picky. I'll go there with you. So went ahead and hit on to the next one, which examines what NASA actually said, because they kept pointing to this article saying this is where NASA proves it. Okay.
54, 1 through 2 claims that the moon has been split, and many Muslims claim that NASA has proven that the moon was split in two. But is that true? The ridges found by NASA that the Muslims are referring to are lobate scarps. Lobate scarps are caused by the cooling and shrinking of the moon, not the moon being split. The youngest lobate scarp is 100 million years according to NASA. In that article that the Muslims are referring to, Muslims claim that Muhammad witnessed the splitting of the moon in the 6th century. This is a little bit of a discrepancy of dates, give or take 99 million years. Next time a Muslim says that there are no scientific errors in the Quran.
That was part 1 of that one, and then we have part 2, because I had to split that in 2 because there's just too much in that article.
You split it in 2.
Yeah, I had to split that one in 2.
Wow, you're better than Allah. That's crazy. Looks like you actually split something in 2. That's impressive.
54, 1 through 2 claims that the moon has been split, and many Muslims claim that NASA has proven that the moon was split in two. The ridges found by NASA that the Muslims are referring to are lobate scarps. If this was evidence that Allah split the moon, then we would only find lobate scarps on the moon. This is not the case. We find them on multiple other moons around other planets, as well as Mercury, where the lobate scarps are over a mile high. So the claim that the lobate scarps are proof of Allah splitting the moon is rather ridiculous.
So yeah, again, you'd have to claim that he split the other moons as well as some other planets in order to make this work.
Yeah. And of course, what the Muslim would say is, or perhaps a Muslim would, as a reaction, would say, oh, look, you see, Allah did this many times, so of course he would have done it now. And we're like, well, no, because according to your book, the whole point of him splitting the moon is so that he could make some sign for Muhammad, for his prophethood. But then does that mean that there's other planets with their own prophets that he also had to show their prophethood by splitting the moon?
Good
and
point.
Then we'd have to say, oh, wow, Allah really did send a prophet to every people, including persons in other planets, which means he also sent prophets to aliens, which means Islam is now saying that there's aliens on other planets and that they know that for a fact. And that must be how we got the space cows. So it's all, you see it all coming together. It's starting to form a clear image, I think.
See, it's all tied together. We actually have the comment down there that's pretty good. He says the Chinese saw a supernova in 1054. I did not actually know that. So if that is the case, and I don't have any reason to doubt it, they would definitely have noticed the moon splitting in two.
Also,
it's a lot closer.
Also, since again, this does have to be taken literally because it's Islam, it's the Quran, then there should be some pretty significant seismic and aquatic effects to the moon just straight up splitting, right? We should have some serious flooding, some pretty, or maybe waves just stop, right? But I would assume some sort of serious change in water activity throughout the earth. And as far as I know, nothing like that happened. Now, of course, the Muslim could say, oh, well, he split the moon, but he split it so finely and also kept it stuck together so much. And I'm like, well, then what did he do? Because at that point, all he did was make it appear like the moon had split. But that's the issue. The passage doesn't say that. It says that in the eternal eyes of Allah, it actually split. Really. It really actually did.
Well, that's just it. It's worse than that, according to the Hadith.
Oh boy, how bad is it?
Everything gets everything gets worse when you go to the Hadith. It's like, oh, you need the context. I'm like, okay, well, we'll look at the context, because some Muslims were claiming, oh, this is a prophecy that's going to happen at the end time, at the end of the world. You see, he says when the time, the time has come. Okay, that's at the end. So let's see if the Hadith agrees with that. And this is just a simple search of moon split on surah.com, which again is such a Christian website. And there is a lot of hadith. A lot of hadith on this, and they all seem to agree that this was during the lifetime of the Prophet.
Well, how do we know that that's a reliable source? I mean,
Well,
how
it's
do we
Sahih
know it's a good
al-Bukhari.
reference? Well, how do we? Well, maybe I don't trust that. Maybe I only trust Sahih Muslim.
Now there's Sahih Muslim. Here's more Sahih al-Bukhari. Here's another one from Sahih
Oh,
al-Bukhari. Here's another one from Sahih al-Bukhari. Here's another one from Sahih al-Bukhari. There are so many. And they all claim that it happened. And the reason why was a witness to the unbelievers. And even told people to bear witness to this event that is happening.
dang. Okay, so yeah, so it wasn't just in the Prophet's lifetime, but it was a thing that was clearly actually visible by a couple people. Now, mind you, if it was clearly visible to the people that he was with, then clearly it was actually visible to everyone on Earth. Because again, this was still given from the POV of Allah, which means it actually did happen in a way that's universally seen. So that's
Again,
that.
so the hadith would be the perspective of someone else. So someone's
True,
narrating
true.
that this happened. So the POV has changed whenever we go here. But again, this is on the basis that the Quran was 100% true. They're believing this, at least the people who are saying and transmitting the hadith. So, such hadith as this one here, and again, this one clearly claims that the moon was split. And I've got Muslims who have left comments saying, well, you see, it was just a little piece of the moon just like popped off, popped back on. You know, it wasn't big enough to really make a big change. And it wasn't long enough that if you weren't really paying attention, you wouldn't see it. You know, except for what this hadith says. It says it was split into two sections, one above this mountain and one above that mountain. So they're far enough apart to be above two separate mountains by this person's perspective.
That's wild. That's like getting a little cookie and breaking it in half and just moving it to different parts of a table. That's, dear goodness. Muhammad has cast a spell upon us. Some of them said if he could cast a spell upon us, he can not cast a spell upon all the people. What on earth? So they're claiming that it's so clear from their perspective that he split the moon so much in two that it's on opposite, it's on completely different locations.
And it's not the only hadith. There are a couple of others in here that agree, well, kind of, that the moon, there's ones that say that the moon was on the other side, split up in two. One part was behind the mountain, and the other one was on this side of the mountain. So this is a little bit of a difference in the story. But again, this is from the person's perspective. But again, it agrees that the moon was split during the lifetime of Muhammad, and it was to such a degree that you could see the difference. Even see one on one side of the mountain, one behind the mountain.
That's wild. So you would have had opposite pools of the effect of the moon and its gravity on the oceans. That's crazy. That would have been wildly destructive to nearly everything on Earth. I mean, that would have been quite cataclysmic and apocalyptic, I think. So, wow.
Yeah,
wow.
in fact, I don't. That's an unreleased short that I did a while back. When I did this, I had one that was looking at the geological evidence for it, and I didn't end up releasing that one. I recorded it, just never got around to releasing it. But yeah, it's like, okay, well, if you're living on the seashore, it's not like any large city or any large civilizations located along any sort of coastal area, except for everyone that ever existed, because the water is much easier to trade over than anything else. They would have definitely noticed the sea level either dropping or rapidly rising this one night. You have had mass flooding. You would have had the whole thing with Atlantis being everywhere. But just much later in the 6th century instead of, whatever they claim it BC was.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. I mean, again, this would have been cataclysmic. This would have been pretty horrendous to the Earth's water, all bodies of water. Yeah, exactly. That would have
Mass
been catastrophic.
extinction level
It would have been
event.
over. It would have been over. Muhammad would have been truly not just the last prophet, but the last person. I mean, that would have been it. You know,
Now, he definitely did believe he was like living in the end times. This was going to be the end. It was going to end before his death. In fact, he did say that there was a young boy. I think it was a hadith that says that there was a young boy and that he would not grow old before the end of the world. Well, the end of the world hasn't yet to come, and I'm pretty sure that boy is dead. Just a
yep.
feeling.
Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty good theory. I think you got some. I think you got some good reasons for thinking that. I mean, I would love to hear a Muslim honestly try to explain this, right? Because you've already explained in those videos you recorded that those are those lobate scarps. Um,
Yes.
so, oh, this is interesting.
No.
Plated.
She is. She's 100% right on that. Very likely because of a volcanic eruption that the sea levels rose. So just think of that volcanic eruption, but turned up to like 9,000 and all over the world, because the moon splitting in two would not be a small event. And again, being resealed up again as one continuous body. Fine, God can do that. I don't doubt God could do that. I mean, even if he wanted to split the moon, fine, he would do it. But if he's going to claim that this is a witness to the unbelievers, there would be some evidence of this.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have to dig
because it
so
claims
hard.
so. Because it claims that it would be a witness. So therefore, there must be evidence that this is actually a witness to the unbelievers and not to their own sources, right? This would have to be because there's unbelievers all over the world. So
Muslims,
obviously, yeah.
if you do not come up, we're going to have to play your part. You know that, right? We're going to have to bring up your objections.
Yep, we'll do it.
To this. It'd be much better if it was coming from you, because then you could respond to us dealing with the objections or your reasons for believing this. And who knows, you might just prove us wrong. So there's that opportunity there. And again, in the live chat, I've posted it multiple times. Anyone can join us. It is open for everyone, anyone or anything at this point, because if a dog could argue this, I would let the dog speak.
I mean, it would probably be more likely a cat. Dogs are not too likely to support Islam, given the rampant cases of dog beating and dog killing, according to the perfect prophet of Islam.
He really had a thing out for dogs.
Yeah, man. Ever since that one little puppy hid when he was waiting for Jibril, he just got so angry. He's like, no more dogs ever again. No more. I'm like, whoa, dude, chill.
Dog phobia.
Yeah. That's true.
Dog-phobic.
Yeah, absolutely dog-phobic.
Fantastic. So one of the objections that Muslims would bring up to this, again, I talked about the I wanted one of them to come up and actually pull this out, because this seems to be their go-to, which is there's a king in like southern India that saw the moon split and then converted to Islam. Yes. The problem with that is no one knows exactly when this guy lived, but he is related to one of the ruling groups at the time. The problem is that ruling group ruled between mid 8th century to the 12th century.
That is significantly later.
Yeah, there's a little out of chronological step there with the acclaimed event.
Yeah, because they said that it happened during the lifetime of the Prophet Muhammad. So did Muhammad live all the way to the 8th or 12th century? Man, I'm learning so much about Islam today. That's wild.
We got another comment here again. Yep. If the Chinese were paying that much attention to the sky to be able to see the small changes, they would have definitely seen. And they kept some seriously good records. I mean, if you want to talk about record keeping, Them and the Romans. Wow. Okay.
Right? Yeah, they
They
killed
put
it.
us to
They did a
shame.
great job. Yeah,
They didn't
honestly.
have computers.
Yeah, they were good back then. They actually cared.
How can anyone not like dogs?
Well,
It's their
you
profile picture.
see,
You see, what's the issue? It's their profile picture. Look at that.
I knew that black dog is
That's it.
typing.
That's
The
it.
black dog is typing. That's a djinn. That's a
You
djinn.
see why? Because black dogs are the devil,
Yep.
according to Muhammad.
Yeah, no, that is Shaitan. Shaitan is typing that. Shaitan has entered the chat. That's it. I mean, what are you going to do about it? You know,
Chinese and Romans. Yep, we're light years ahead of the desert Arab. Yep.
yeah. Desert Arabians probably could have been doing better if it weren't for Islam, to be completely honest. I mean, you know, it's an Arab climate, or arid. It's an arid climate. It's not exactly one of the best where Muhammad was, kind of a backwater area. But all things considered, I still think they would have been technologically significantly more advanced without Islam. Because even modern day, right, if you look at what many traditional Muslims are arguing for, like Daniel Hakikachu is arguing for a reduction of technology, reduction of medicine, reduction of education, reduction of exposure to new information, new technology. And he's not alone in that, right? He's not alone at all. There's actually a lot of traditionalist Muslims who say we have to return to the time of the Prophet. We have to make the entire world, the entire ummah at least, just like it was on the planet when Muhammad was around. And so, of course, the greatest goal, the teleology of all of existence, is that we would live like a 7th century caravan robber. So, pretty cool. And
Well, actually, that's pretty consistent with Islam.
oh yeah,
So
yeah,
I gotta give it to him. He's being consistent, and I can at
Exactly.
least respect that part of it.
oh for
Not
sure.
what he's being consistent on necessarily, but
Yeah.
at least he's being consistent.
Yeah, no, I do respect the fact that Daniel actually is willing to stick to his beliefs pretty fundamentally in the most honest interpretations of the verses. You won't really find that with most Muslims in the West, at least, right? So, I definitely respect him for that. That being said, I know that most Muslims do not care to interpret things as honestly as Daniel does, and especially if there's any in the chat right now, I'd love to see a Muslim who actually cares enough to try and level some sort of objection. Because
That's what I'm keeping an eye on. In fact, I'm about ready to pull up another objection I have heard in the chat. I mean, that's probably one of the most disliked videos on my live stream, on my channel, is that one there. I think most of it's from India. So I picked a time that would be convenient for Indians, actually. So it doesn't seem like anyone wanted to join. How sad.
yeah, that's too bad.
So one of the common objections I've heard is, of course, the trying to pull it back to the Bible, saying, well, you see, you believe that Jesus did miracles. So it would only be natural that Muhammad would then do miracles. There's a couple of issues with that, even with the sun holding steady in the sky and all of that they try to point to. Besides being just that being written by perspective, the other issue is every miracle that God does in the Bible has a purpose. It's not just fickle. It's not just random. So the question would be, well, what is this? And by the Hadith, it looks like it is supposed to be a sign to me, the unbeliever, that Muhammad is a prophet. And if it's supposed to be a sign to me, then I should be able to at least find some historian from that time period, independent of Islam, that would agree that this event occurred. Again, that would be great testimony, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's got to be some, right? Because after all, we know that in the 1st and 2nd century AD, there were non-Christian historians writing about Christians and even about miracles in the Christian community, while they themselves were not even Christian writers who were writing that. So surely the world had enough historical backing and historical experience with writing histories and biographies that surely someone by the time of Muhammad, centuries later, would have had the skills and wherewithal to write down that the moon just split in the sky, one part behind the mountain, the other part on the other side of the mountain. So surely somebody had the wherewithal and skills and aptitude to write down, wow, the moon split. Anyways, no, there's got to be something.
So yeah, remember this happened in the claimed to have happened in the approximate beginning of the 6th century, give or take a few years. Again, the Quran's not really clear when exactly this happened. It didn't give a time date stamp on it. But like you were pointing out, in fact, that's where I was going with this, is we have non-Christian sources that agree that Jesus did perform miracles. In fact, as early as the 2nd century, we find one of the first hit pieces on Christianity on the True Doctrine, which was written by a Greek philosopher. And his whole intent was to disprove Christianity, not by claiming that Jesus wasn't real. He agreed that Jesus was real. There's no question about that. That he really did die on the cross, no question about that. But that he wasn't the Son of God. He was just a magician doing all these miraculous signs. But in so doing, confirms that those are actually done, and he has some eyewitness accounts of those happening. And that is, again, try to disprove Christianity, you end up just building it up higher.
Yeah, I actually have a book in my library. I'm going to pull it out real quick, so I might be gone for a minute, but it has a lot of the early sources from non-Christian historians and all their comments trying to talk about Christ, the followers of Christus, how they gathered together, breaking bread and drinking wine, and worshiping Christus like a god, right? And it's really interesting from a Roman perspective that don't believe in Christianity, them writing it down. So let me grab that because I think it's really interesting, and also because Islam doesn't have it, so it's funny to rub it in their face.
Absolutely. Someone claims that it was put in there as a way to show his authority over the pagan moon worshippers. Yes, it was just added on to the Quran, probably added on later on. At least that's what I would expect, because the Quran multiple times says that Muhammad never performed any miracles. He never performed any miracles. And you have this that everyone's claiming, look, Muhammad claimed miracles. It does look like it's something that was added on later on. When they believe they need the power over that. So that is crazy that they believe to this day that actually occurred. And again, what we're pointing to are miracles that occurred during Jesus' time that, again, like True Doctrine was talking about, that was within 200 years of the event occurring. They wrote that down, and we don't see anything like that for this moon splitting. We see maybe someone in India writing it maybe anywhere from like 300 to 400 years after the event, or 500 years after the event, allegedly, considering that even in India, there's no historian that actually agrees that he existed. It's just more of a parable that they look to that legend as being. So I don't agree that the Arabs are necessarily dumb on them. Got dumber. I don't think they are. I think they just are taking this as blind faith and aren't willing to actually examine it necessarily. NASA doesn't support it. Nope. And they've clearly come out with articles after the fact of the moon shrinking article, which is available online. Just need to look up NASA moon shrinking. Let me go ahead and share this tab instead. Here we go. Shrinking moon. And it's talking about the earthquakes that may be causing, and that is right there. It's the lobate scarps that most Muslims point to. In fact, I've just before this live stream was watching a video that a Muslim was saying, see here, here's the proof right here that that has occurred. And this again is from the article about the shrinking of the moon by NASA. Not saying that the moon split, but saying that it was shrinking and that's what's causing the lobate scarps we're seeing there. So, and again, they're not that big. If this was actually splitting the moon, then it should be from pole to pole or at least around a section as proof. Now, that would have been great proof for Islam again, if that would have been the case. And there just isn't. Yes, scars on the moon. They also have article on the ripples they found on the moon itself. Share this one instead. There we go. But again, this is not proof that the moon split, but yet these are pictures that are shared around saying, see, the moon split. It happened. And nope, no, it's not. Shrinking is the opposite of splitting in some regards, yes. In other regards, I guess not, but either way. Yes. I'm talking about, well, the lobate scarps is a classification of that. It's more specific to the article that they originally sent me to, which for some reason doesn't exist anymore, which I need to update that video so it has the link to the right one. Because I bring the references whenever I talk about stuff like that. And again, we had the Hadith. We can look at some of those. Share this instead. The overwhelming Hadith that say that the moon split. Again, from Sahih al-Bukhari, Sahih Muslim. I mean, these are Sahih Hadith. They're reliable as far as Hadith come from. So you have to reject all the Hadith in order to reject these by their authenticity. So the moon was split into two pieces. Here we go. The moon was split into two parts during the lifespan of the Prophet. Here we go again. The moon was split up into two parts during the life of Allah's Messenger. So there's no question that this was an actual physical splitting between the moon, according to the Quran, according to Islam. The only issue is, again, no evidence of this, historical or otherwise. We have a claim here that might have been about a solar eclipse, which could be the case. If you believe the Quran is false, then you can make that case saying that Muhammad just saw a solar eclipse, had no clue what it was, and then says, oh, look, the moon is splitting. Look how miraculous I am, which could totally be a thing. So, but if you want to claim that the Quran is true, then no, that does not fit, because again, it is very clear that the Quran is from Allah's point of view. So it's Allah's authority that is saying that the moon split. And the Hadith agree that it wasn't just a little split and put back together, but it was a massive breaking up of the moon that would have led to mass extinction upon Earth. So it doesn't take very much for the sea levels to rise to cause massive issues in some places. So again, anyone here is free to join us. I left this specifically on some Muslims' comments under the short, saying that they are free to come join us for this live stream to give their perspective. Definitely those who were calling me a liar, who had no clue what I was doing. Definitely those who claimed that I graduated from KFC, which again, I like KFC. It's pretty good. But at least that was creative. I'll give them that much. So it's always interesting when they come up with creative insults instead of just a copy and paste. An article. You have an article on it, ? Moon splitting? Yes, it seems to be pretty big as far as the traction goes. And it's crazy that it is. Again, I did not create that video thinking it was going to be as big as it was, but it became big, so I went ahead and revisited it. And this seems to be something that they want to stand on and they have to believe. And unfortunately, it is a very weak point to stand on for Islam. And if it was to be disproven that this did not happen and the Quran is false, then Islam topples. That's the problem with making grandiose claims. Do Muslims provide reasons why Allah split the moon? According to the Hadith here, it looks like it is to bear witness to the unbelievers. Specifically, there were unbelievers that were asking him to, and he went ahead and split the moon, which again does contradict the Quran in other locations because they say over and over again that Muhammad never did a miracle. Yet here it's very clear that the miracle was done so that they can prove to the non-believer, so i.e. me, who does not believe, would then be brought into Islam and believe based upon it, but yet not a thing. It would be much more entertaining if there was something along those lines. Let's see here. I finally got one revelation right. It seems that the full moon would be called seeing a black crack. Yeah. No, actually got a couple right in the got a couple right as far as prophecy goes. Muhammad got one specifically right where he says that he would die a certain way if he was a false prophet. And then he dies in that exact way, according to his own testimony. Which severing is so bad.
The aorta.
Yep, the severing of the aorta. And it's like, oh, dude. And it's such an odd thing because he's saying he's dying of this poison and he feels that it is severing his aorta. And I'm like, that is one odd statement. I mean, if you think of poison, it's like, okay, burning sensation. Some poisons cause massive pain. But a cutting feeling? Like someone's literally cutting through a part of your body? Seems a little odd. Definitely when it was something that was messing with his mouth, messing with his throat, basically rotting him from the inside out by some accounts.
Yeah.
Really nasty thing. I don't know what it was that was used, but man alive, it was a nasty piece of business.
Yeah, definitely not fun. I couldn't find those apologetics books because it looks like I lent them out to somebody, which is for lending books. Never lend books, but they are J. Warner Wallace's Cold Case Christianity, Forensic Faith, and Cosmic Crime Scene. Cold Case Christianity and Forensic Faith both have sections where they have discussions of Miles Bar Serapion, of Pliny the Younger, of a whole host of random Jewish, non-Jewish, Roman historians, and then I guess a little bit from some Christian historians later, but those are not as interesting to secular people. So the non-Christian historians from the Romans and the Jewish people writing about Jesus, including Josephus. So it's really interesting to see the writings from them.
Ooh,
was there a new
latest?
No way. No way.
I think you just sold a book.
That must be it. good thing I gave it away. Amen. You see, this is all part. Thank the Lord. This all worked out. Wow, that is a much better title. Holy moly. Wow, that is a much better title. It's orange now instead of blank. It's cool.
Cool. So we got someone saying one day he'll get his degree in KFC mac and cheese.
That's a good degree. That's a worthwhile education.
Muslims,
right there.
It's very reliable.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, there's something else in the chat. New edition. Right here. He was talking about why didn't Allah just provide people evidence that jinns exist in order. Again, this is one of the things that is in Islam that's not in Christianity or in Judaism. So this would be something that would be a very powerful testimony to Christians and Jews if they could actually prove that these jinn existed, right? So if these jinn actually existed, they're not demons, they're not angels, they're something completely different. These jinn existing would be evidence, strong evidence even, for Islam being true. And again, I'm giving away these like, hey, if there was this, then there would be strong evidence. If there was this, there would be strong evidence. If there's this, there would be strong evidence. And that would make sense. Again, everything that is given in the Bible is intended to be shown. And again, you got to look at the perspective of who wrote it, as well as who it was being written to, because that can make a huge difference, because it might be using language that was intended for the people that would understand it. Again, a lot of what Jesus said would be references to the Old Testament that were direct quotes that, of course, the Jews would instantly get, would instantly connect the two dots.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. There's a pretty significant, just as you were saying, there's a very significant difference between the notion of signs and miracles in the Bible versus the Quran, right? Number one, because in one sense, the Quran says that Muhammad is just a plain warner who is not going to perform any miracles. And then the Quran contradicts itself, or at least Muslims, the way they interpret the Quran, they contradict it by saying that also he had a miracle, which was the moon splitting, right? So apparently Allah is eternally contradictory and eternally against himself. But, you know, I guess that's cool. Even though that means he literally cannot be Allah, because now he has wills that are manifestly opposed. But, you know, who cares? So aside from that point, that's fundamentally not worse than a paradox, a contradiction. What you see in Islam is a complete misunderstanding of the value of the question, why? You might even go so far as to say that there is no real why in Islam, right? The moon splitting. What's so profoundly and fundamentally powerful about that, right? Because now, of course, a Muslim could say, "Oh, well, what's so profound about the sky getting dark during the crucifixion of Christ?" And I would say, "Oh, well, many times during Shiva and after the death of someone's son, they would blow out the candle that they had in their house in order to show that their son had passed, right?" And so if Jesus is the Son of God, then what candle would be blown out that would be culturally relevant, that people would understand in that cultural context? Well, the very sun in the sky itself. And so that is why a Roman soldier next to the cross would be able to see all of this happening and realize, oh my goodness, this man truly is the Son of God, right? Like, he puts the images together. He's like, wait a second, this is wild. He's seeing all of it. And so all of this becomes quite clear that reality is pointing to the identity of Christ and the miracles. Someone could say, well, why do you walk on water? And I'd say, well, this is actually pointing back to Job, where it says that Yahweh, God, walks upon the surface of the waters, or back to Genesis, where it says the Spirit of God hovers over the surface of the waters. And so Jesus, walking on the surface of the waters, shows himself not just to be divine in some general or generic sense, but to be God himself, right? So miracles have a purpose. And then someone might say, what about Moses? Moses wasn't the Son of God, but he split a whole sea open. And I would say, yeah, for a purpose, to get people out of slavery, because they had to get out. There was an army after them, right? There's purposes, there's reasons, there's logic to it. It's not just miracles for the sake of magic tricks, right? That's what the pagans did. That's what the fake groups did. They just did magic tricks for the sake of wowing people. Jesus didn't just wow people. He did things that proved his identity, and Moses had miracles that he performed through the power of God that proved, number one, the identity of God, the one true God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but also is the one who's the deliverer. He will deliver his people out of slavery. So all these miracles in the Bible have powerful and impactful miraculous meaning, because God is not just pure will but also intellect, and so he actually has reasons for the things he does. That it's so fundamentally different from Islam, in which things just happen and people just say, "Oh, Allah knows," you know, if that, right? Allah wills it, so it happens. Where's
Well,
the reason?
you hit a very critical point. This is a massive difference between Christianity and Islam, where each of the miracles in the Bible and the Torah have a purpose, have a reason behind. There's an intent. There's a God who's actually put this into being and planned it out so that these are referring back to, like you were saying, Old Testament, saying, hey, this is who I am. This is my authority. I am doing these things that only ever were contributed to God himself in order to establish my identity. Let's play devil's advocate a little bit. Is there any point that the moon being split as like this is a common thing that was in either Christianity or Judaism? And I don't think so. I mean, there's never.
Nothing I could imagine. That does make me wonder one thing though, because the response by the people is the weird part. The weird part for me in that Quran passage is when it says you're using magic of old, right? Because then that makes it sound like the same statements they said where they said, "Oh, you're just telling stories of old. You're telling stories of long ago." And they say, same old magic of old. So I'm wondering if they like took legendary stories from other cultures, if they were just kind of like floating around, or maybe it's old, old stories people had about the moon being split, and their response was just like, "Oh, that again? Oh, this again?" So I think he just heard a story about the moon being split, and he's like, "You know what? This sounds like a good thing to say." And so he threw that in there because, very little of Islam is in any meaningful way original or unique in any way that would be impressive or effective. So that the response people say is so interesting to me. Same old magic, the magic of old. It sounds like they're saying, "Oh, we've heard the story before."
Now that's a good point. I mean, granted, there was a moon god that was around, Allah, a moon god. Oh boy. So the splitting of the moon maybe is trying to parallel that in some way or claim this as his thing, as having power over the moon. I mean, in the Old Testament, the 12 plagues of Egypt, again, aren't anything just randomly pulled out. Oh, I'm going to darken the sky. Oh, I'm going to, have all this occur. No, each one of those was part of the pantheon of the Egyptian people. Their gods. God was literally stepping in and saying, okay, I'm going to take out this god. Okay, you think that god's worth worshiping? No, he's not. You see, I have power over each one of these things you claim is a god. I can just come in and willy-nilly just wipe them out. They're nothing compared to me. That's who you're dealing with. And if they was trying to make a claim like that here, okay, I could kind of see that. But again, that wasn't the intent. The reaction of the people would have been different. It wouldn't have been, oh, he's doing these magic tricks, or oh, he's claiming this old story again, which is something we know in the Quran he did multiple times. People accuse him of just copying and pasting the old stuff in again. Oy. So I don't think any Muslims are actually going to come up for this one.
I mean, they might just be afraid. They might just be running.
You're
running.
You guys claim this to be such a critical thing. I mean, this is the one that got over 100,000 views on my video, most of them from India. And guess what? A good portion of you guys didn't like the video. So I know you disagree with me. Here's your opportunity. If you guys pass it by, don't whine later.
I want to make some predictions about the comments on this video when people are watching. So let's see if we have any prophetic power or ability. I'm thinking some of the really high level objections we're going to see in the comments are as follows. Inshallah, you shall taste hellfire is one guess I have. I'm guessing that's going to be a comment, maybe. They'll say, like, inshallah, you shall taste hellfire. Or number 2, you're just lying. All you do is lie. You're just lying about the Quran without actually explaining what we've said is a lie or incorrect. Number 3, this one's a little interesting. I'm thinking some of them might say, well, Allah just means God, so you're really disproving your own God, right? I'm trying to think of those really high-level academic responses that Muslims give, because Allah has given such great minds to the believers. So those are my prophecies. I'm going to throw some prophetic judgments out there. I'm going to see if I can figure out what kind of responses and comments Muslims might leave, right? Or you just don't. Here's number 4, prediction number 4. You just don't know all the great responses people have given to this. If you just would check out this video by insert random person or Dr. Zakir Naik here, then you'd know the truth, right? Even though, again, we're dealing with the Quran verse itself and the Hadith verses themselves, right? So anything that goes away from that is losing the literal interpretation of it from the POV of Allah or the Prophet or his companions. So again, I've made 4 predictions, 4 prophetic predictions. I would love to see Muslims in the comment section prove that I have such amazing prophetic ability, because then that would be a great thing. It would show that Muhammad was not the last prophet, and that turns out there's other ones too. Who would have guessed? And there goes Islam. So that's what I would say.
Oh, I would agree with you. Another one that I'd add is probably, it's not the eyes that are blind, but the heart.
Yeah, that's good. Never mind.
I'm literally arguing that if we would have seen this, it would have been good evidence. I'm arguing from the eyes perspective. So we'll find out.
Yep.
We'll find out what they do. So we'll go ahead and say, if you guys want to join in for any Q&A, we'll go ahead and do that. If not, okay, we might just go ahead and see what happens. Let this go out and see if we get any great responses in there. Hopefully something more authentic than what I've seen so far, because the comments that I've seen so far have been kind of boring from the Muslims. The creative one, the KFC one, that was at least creative, right?
Yeah, that one's kind of cool.
That was actually creative. Their bro graduated from KFC menu. Okay, that's creative. It's not the copy and paste I get everywhere. I mean, I could at least say that you spent a little bit of time to think of that one. Instead of just going to every video, copy paste, copy paste, copy paste.
I do like that one. I mean, there's something there is something kind of funny about that comment. That's pretty good. Here's some fun things. Here's some ways that people have tried to deal with the moon splitting. The Arabic uses the past tense as if that day were already here to help the reader listener imagine how it will be. Some traditional commentators hold that view that this describes an actual event at the time of the prophet, but it clearly refers to the end of the world. And so that's really interesting, because that's from a Muslim scholar who can't really decide who's more correct, Allah and his perspective, or the Hadiths and Muhammad, their perspectives.
Now, again, there is such a thing as a prophetic past tense.
Sure,
that could be used. Fine. I would really be willing to grant that for this. Absolutely. Yeah. If it wasn't for the fact that I have so many Muslims telling me that this is an event that's already happened, and we have all these hadith that agree that it is something that has occurred. So that Muslim scholar is going against all of these hadith. So who is more reliable? Muslims, who's more reliable? This one random Muslim scholar? Or all of these hadith from Sahih al-Bukhari? So, yeah,
there's some clever ways to get around this. I mean, Some other responses: Western historians such as A.J. Weinsick and Dennis Greel reject the historicity of the miracle, arguing that the Quran itself, as I was saying before, denies miracles in the traditional sense in connection with Muhammad. And so, again, a Muslim, just to help Muslims out, because, according to Sahih Muslim, we'll be helping them out in the end because they put all their sins on our back. So let's help them out while we're here too. You could just simply say something like, oh, well, this wasn't a miracle that actually happened. I'm going to reject the moon splitting as a miraculous sign, scientific evidence. I'm going to reject that argument. You could do that, okay? That's a real thing you could do. You could just say, this wasn't a miracle in the time of the Prophet. And as a result, after you reject this as a scientific evidence, scientific miracle, you also would have to reject Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, but at least you would still have the Quran, right? At least. Now, of course, then the moment you go to that, you're like, wait, this is Allah's perspective. And so we'd have to ask, what is this meant to be? What's this meant to refer to? But again, like, there's probably somewhat, no, because if you just make it Quran only, then that means you go against the Quran when it says you have to follow the teachings of Muhammad. So
on top of that, the Hadith are really the backbone, at least the historical backbone of the Quran itself. I mean, we would have no clue when this actually came out if it wasn't, or when it was put together, how it was put together, or anything like that. And they still have no clue who actually wrote the Quran. They know who compiled it, but they have no clue who actually wrote down the Quran itself. You claim, oh, Muhammad, oh, Allah did it. Well, no, the book that you guys get upset with if anyone rips it or tears it or anything like that, because you believe that it is a holy book that is set apart and it is something that Allah himself will protect. Okay, fine. If that is the case, then who actually wrote it? Because it would be man written, no matter how you get around it. And you don't know who that is. And if you throw out the Hadith, then you have no clue when it was or how it was collected. And if you throw out the Hadith, there's just a cascade of things, because then you end up the 5 pillars of Islam topple one after the other, because guess where those are found? Not all of them are found in here. Just to let you know. Question how many times you pray a day.
Exactly. That's right. Right. I mean, how many times you pray, the exact actions of the Prophet when he was entering a bathroom, the washing of the Prophet, the exact way that he did it. If the most important verses in the Hadith, right? You could say the eyes are the leather strap of the anus, right? And so that's really powerful. And without that, how would you even live your life? I mean, I can't wake up a single day without knowing that the eyes are the leather strap of the anus. So when you get down to it, your most profound and poetic teachings, such as Aisha saying, surely no one suffers as much as the wives of the believing, right? Such powerful, poetic, and artsy teachings. So, yeah, I hope Muslims would not be so quick to throw out the Hadith, but sadly, the only way out of this argument is to throw out all of the Hadith to nullify this, right?
Yep.
Exactly. No, maybe that's even more important. They wouldn't know how to wipe their butt.
Well, shahada. Find me the shahada in the Quran.
Yeah,
I mean, those
that's
exact
true.
words in the Quran.
Exact words. Yep. Yep. Can't find it.
A little bit up a creek.
Yeah.
So if you reject, this all goes back. So if you reject the Hadith, you reject Islam itself, because Islam itself is the Quran and the Hadith. Without one or the other, you are in some serious hot water.
And again, you do have to reject the Hadith for the interpretation of the moon splitting to make sense. So if you want to say that it's actually eschatological, that it's actually an end times thing from the perspective of Allah, then you have to get rid of the Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, which are the best in authority. Therefore, you might as well get rid of all the other ones too. So
just a little. Just a
Just
little.
yeah,
Little
just a
bit.
teensy. You know,
Almost
just a little
like,
bit.
our Grand Theft Auto video. Just a
Yeah,
little.
exactly. Yeah, just a little bit. You know, but again, if you want to find a way out of this, Muslims just reject the claim that it's a scientific miracle and reject the interpretations found in Sahih Muslim, Sahih Bukhari, and all the other hadith. So, and if you reject that, just reject the hadiths, right? Because those are actually Sahih parts of the hadiths. And then all you have left is the Quran. But if you have the Quran, then you don't really have Islam. So, TLDR, too long, don't read. Simple answer is this: Islam cannot be true.
Nope. Contradicts
Islam
itself.
cannot.
There's really no historical backing for its claims. I mean, the scientific miracles that they claim either were already well known, like, iron coming from meteorites. Yeah, the Egyptians knew that for centuries. The Egyptians just looked at it and said, "What? You guys just now realize this? Holy cow, you guys are slow."
As they said that, the amazing space cow falls from space right then and there.
Cow falls.
That'd
Oh boy. Now
be
that
great.
would be interesting.
That'd be amazing because they're like, oh no, it's the space cow's returned with its out of this world ice cream, and Muhammad has to go close to the space cow and he has to milk it, but then he realizes, wait, this isn't a camel and that's not urine, so he gets disgusted by it and finds the nearest camel to drink the camel urine. Which, of course, again, Muslims, would you know how valuable camel urine is if you didn't have the hadith?
Nope.
Think about that. There goes your entire medical insurance, health insurance, all gone. So, what are you going to do?
Oh, yes. I choose the cow. So would most of
I
us.
choose the cow. I choose the cow. It's so funny. That really does apply to so many situations. It's so funny. If I have to choose between meteorites falling from space and the cow, I choose the cow.
So that's always fun when Muslims try to reject the hadith, because it's like, okay, no, you don't really. Most of them don't really reject all the hadith. They reject only the ones they don't like. So,
Yep.
again, there's a lot of hadith. There are so many hadith. There are, if memory serves, 95 books in Sahih al-Bukhari alone. That's a lot to go through. So, and many of them have not gone through them.
Yeah. And even on the matter of hadiths, whenever you're interacting with a Muslim or anybody in the audience, make sure to ask them the logic behind accepting certain hadith and giving them a high rating and rejecting some hadith. Just because a Muslim claims that this is a higher quality hadith doesn't mean it actually is, right? That's an assumption. We'll say, oh, it's an unbroken chain of narration. We'll say, well, that's what it's claiming, right? We don't actually know if that's the case, because this is the only source stating that. So, we don't really have any other way to attest to that. But maybe you think that there's some other way to attest to that chain of narration. Oddly enough, the early Christian church actually has better attestation to early chains of narration, because all of Paul's students, right, his students actually had their own writings, and many of his students actually wrote based off of the writings of each other. And so the writings of the disciples and students of Peter, right after Mark, he's got his own chain of students for over 100 years, right? And they're writing based off each other, what they learned from each other, and early leaders of the church there. John's students from Polycarp and Irenaeus and all of them, they also are writing to each other and about their teacher, and then they also have people using their writings later. So we actually have independent documented attestation in the case of Christianity, with a much better case for chain of narration, if you want to use the Islamic term for it. in the Hadiths, we don't really have anything like what the Muslims claim to have. So if you claim to value Hadiths and chain of narration, actually you'd find a much better sequence of independent documented chains of narration in Christianity. At least 3 different chains from Paul's students, Peter's students, and John's students. Again, that's in Forensic Faith and Cold Case Christianity by J. Warner Wallace. Really good books for checking out the early chains of custody, as he calls it in the books.
Yeah, because it's not really the chain of narration. The chain of narration would be, I tell you a story, and then you believe that I'm a trustworthy individual. Therefore, the chain of narration is solid. And then you believing that, go tell your students who believe that you're trustworthy the same story I told you. And if anyone has played telephone, they know there's a small issue with this process. And that it shouldn't be something that you need to put your entire faith and build it off of. Again, I've been called a liar multiple times for pointing out that we know who wrote the Gospel of John. As it says, the Gospel according to John.
John. Literally in the name, but we don't. Oh my goodness, I just found it. I forgot I had so many books that I had to start using my secret cupboards. Holy moly.
Okay, I think we have an issue here. You got so many books, you need to start hiding them. I think we have an addiction.
I think you're right. I didn't realize that I hid them in my special nobody touched these books cupboard. Wow, these are actually high. Wow, I actually kept these in great condition. Thank God. Oh, this is great. Now I put a Chick-fil-A card in the exact place that I wanted to go to, and it's exactly what we're talking about now. Man, that is crazy? I haven't seen this in months. That is actually wild. That I had a card just ready there. Wow.
See, it's a miracle, right? There you go.
Look at that. And they apparently me a couple months ago knew me better than I do now. And so, I knew that I would want to flip to this someday. Wow, that is amazing. That is great. So Thallus, here we go. Unfriendly pagan accounts from outside the Christian casebook. Thallus, 85 to 80-60 is around his time. There we go. Quotes Thallus' attempt to explain away the darkness occurring at Jesus' crucifixion. So again, Thallus is perhaps the earliest secular writer to mention Jesus, and he is so ancient his writings don't even exist anymore. But another historian, Sextus Julius Africanus, writing around 82-21, quotes Thallus' attempt to explain away the darkness occurring at Jesus' crucifixion. So mind you, Thallus is a secular writer in the 1st century who wanted to find a way to explain the darkness felt and the shaking of the earth during Jesus' crucifixion. He said, on the whole world there pressed a most fearful darkness, and the rocks were rent by an earthquake, and at many places in Judea and other districts were thrown down. This darkness Thallus, in the 3rd book of his history, calls, as appears to me without reason, an eclipse of the sun. So Thallus is trying to say, the reason it got all dark and the reason the earth shook was because there was a solar eclipse and there was an earthquake. The issue is, even him claiming that means that he admits that the Gospels are correct when they say that there was a darkness around the earth and an earthquake, which means he affirms the actual phenomenon that occurred during the crucifixion, right? He just tries to give an alternative explanation to them.
Now, he was the guy I was quoting earlier, by the way, the Greek philosopher. So that's where that's pointing to.
Oh, really? Was that
part of that book?
That's amazing.
Yeah, on True Doctrine.
That is so cool.
But yes, it was him that was trying to disprove Christianity, but as you see there, that didn't work out so well.
Yeah, never does.
I love those independent sources. That's like
so many actually.
Say, look at this. See, you got this one. You got this one. You got this Roman who is in charge.
And there's so many. I mean, we also have
who is writing to Rome saying, "Hey, I need you to come. We need to kill these Christians. We need to wipe them out. I need more soldiers to wipe them out." They believe that Jesus is God, and it's like, okay. Well, obviously, and that came, if memory serves, that comes from the 2nd century again. That's before the Council of Nicaea. Just pointing that part out there for anyone who's obsessed with the Council of Nicaea.
I mean, I know somebody who thought it was a book in the Bible, but you know,
It's what was
but-
removed. The Council of Nicaea was removed from the Bible. Oh my goodness. Okay, guys.
yeah,
Ugh.
right after Matt 12 or whatever. After Matt 12.
Give me the reference.
We
I
have
don't
this is
know.
like amazing though. I mean, think of it's Matt 12. I don't know, but think of this, right? Islam doesn't have this. We have Tacitus, AD 56 to 117, in his book Annals, described Emperor Nero's effort to blame Christians for the Great Fire in Rome, and Christus, from whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilatus. And a mischievous superstition, thus checked for the moment, again broke out not only in Judea, the first source of the evil, but even in Rome, where all things hideous and shameful from every part of the world find their center and become popular. So Tacitus is writing that there's these followers of Christus, and Nero had made exquisite tortures on these abominations called Christians, and Christus was executed by the extreme penalty, which that's how they talked about crucifixion, during the time of Pontius Pilate. So again, we have all these wonderful forms of attestation, historical attestation by secular non-Christian authors about this. Phaedon as well, Pliny the Younger, well known for being the spy, right? We have this early accounts of a spy sent to check out early Christians, Mara bar Serapion, Suetonius, Celsus, and then other unfriendly Jewish accounts from Josephus, the Jewish Talmud in 8400 700. All these different extra-biblical, anti-Christian sources historically showing exactly what Christians thought and believed about Christ, right? This is profound. I mean, this is very, very powerful stuff to think about.
So wait,
in
for a
Islam,
second here. You said that he gave an account that Jesus died, right? On the cross.
Yes.
There you go again, disproving Islam even from the pagans.
Look at that. Look at that.
I wanted to kill the Christians.
Yes, yes. You see, because now, of course, the Muslim will say, oh, well, Allah made it appear as if Jesus had been killed. And I would say, okay, so Allah made it appear that Jesus was killed, but he didn't make it appear like Muhammad was killed, because Muhammad just straight up died because of some poison lamb. So Allah loved Jesus more than he loved Muhammad. Why is that? Apparently, Allah would not let one of his great ones suffer, not one of his great prophets. So Jesus was too great to have him suffer, and so apparently Allah saved him, but not Muhammad. Not Muhammad. He just suffered. Strange.
Allah made it appear that verse is in the Quran. It's not actually there. Allah just made it appear as if it was there. Well, let's just think of that for a second. So we just extrapolate that concept. So the concept is Jesus didn't die on the cross. It was made to look so because Allah wanted to protect Jesus. Someone else was sacrificed, taken his place and died. Again, bit of a issue there with sacrificial atonement, but we'll ignore that for now. So all these Christians, all the followers of Jesus, all believe that Jesus died and then came back later and said, hey guys, Allah saved me from that death. I didn't actually die. No, he doesn't say that. There's no account that actually occurred. So that would have been a great point for him to clarify it. But let's say that didn't happen. Let's say it's just all made up after that point. It is Allah himself who made Christianity. So is it truly our fault if we believe Allah? Or are we to disbelieve Allah?
Well, really, you see, sin is only going against the will and nature of God. So if you take that as the definition of sin and Allah wills that people be disbelievers, then really we're doing what's in accordance with the will of Allah, which means we're not sinning, which means we don't actually have any sins on ourselves. So, that's actually pretty impressive, I think. That's actually really intriguing. I think you actually could make a very serious philosophical critique of Islam based off the fact that Allah is purely deterministic, that he just wills whatever and it just happens like that, and there's no nuance whatsoever. Because that means that there's... Yeah, just really fickle, right? It's like what was said in a different live stream I had watched. Maybe that was Mary, I can't remember. But about the nature of Allah just being pure will, right? No intellect, just pure will. He just wills things and they kind of just happen. And that means that there's no such thing as sin, because sin is going against whatever Allah wills, but Allah wills that you are a disbeliever, which means being a disbeliever is not a sin because you're forced to be a disbeliever. Yeah. So sin doesn't exist. Now I get it.
I'm not even sure if they know what sin is necessarily, because at the same time, you have the section where it says that if humanity wouldn't sin, then Allah would wipe them out and replace them with someone who would sin. It's like, okay, hold on. So it is your will that they sin? So if they don't sin, then they are sinning because they're not doing your will?
Yeah, that's actually really confusing.
Bit of a contradiction here.
Wait a second, this is a freaky stuff. Okay, wait, that's right. So okay, they wouldn't be able to define sin as doing what Allah wills or doing what He doesn't will. So what would sin be? That's really interesting. I actually
it would have
don't
to
know.
be whatever Allah decides to do at the moment, and something that can constantly change. Because you could have say, well, shirk is the unforgivable sin, but then at the same time, over here you have Allah declaring that all the angels should bow down and worship Adam, and the only one that doesn't is the one that says, no, I'm not going to worship another other than Allah, and he's the devil, and he gets smacked down for it. It's like, wait, hold on here.
I mean,
so sin is just constantly, the definition for sin in Islam is just this amorphous thing that maybe you're hitting it, maybe you're not. Maybe today it's a sin, maybe tomorrow it's not. I mean, that would actually make sense with the drinking as well, because it wasn't a sin. Now it's a sin, and it's not retroactive. It's not Allah being consistent with Himself, saying that this is against my will 100%. It's, oh, I decided it's okay for today, and now it's not okay. But when you get into heaven, you can drink all you want, and that's okay.
Yeah. No, that's it. I think you're right. I think sin would have to be not doing the thing that Allah tells you, but it seems like Allah has two wills, right? He has two wills, because He's got that one will where He's telling you what's right and wrong, but the Quran also says that He wills that some be wrongdoers and disbelievers, and that He not guide them on the right path, and then He wills that some He does. So
is there anything, is there any sin at all then in Islam? Because if you're just doing what Allah wants you to do, then are you really the one who is sinning?
I kid you not. This actually makes a lot more sense now. In my philosophy of religion book down there, I actually know where that one is. In the philosophy of religion book down there, there's a section on Islamic theodicies, how they explain evil, the problem of evil. And all three, it's idiotic. It's really stupid. It's supposed to be Oxford level, but it's repugnant. They're one of the three possible answers in Islam historically. One of them, the first one they showed in the book, was that evil and good aren't actually distinct things. They're illusions that we, from a human perspective, describe them as. But in the eyes of Allah, good and evil are the same thing, because they're both things that He wills. So actually, for a long time in Islam, exactly what you just said, you just outsmarted apparently one of their more famous philosophers. The idea is that everything is what Allah wills, and everything that Allah wills is what is proper, right, according to His eyes. Therefore, there is no such thing as good and evil, actually. There's no objective good, no objective evil. Things just kind of happen.
That's gotta be that would be horrendously scary. It would just
Yeah.
be I would if I was a Muslim, I would have to be terrified of every step that I do. And I can't even rely on doing the same thing and making sure that I'm doing the what I considered was right the day before, because I don't know if today Allah considers that to be true or not. And at the same time, for example, something I did, you know, shooting the Quran. It was Allah's will that I shot the Quran. So was it really me shooting the Quran, or was it Allah shooting the Quran?
But the Quran is his eternal mind, which means that was Allah willing that you shoot Allah? But that means that Allah has eternally wanted to be shot.
So see, I'm
But
just doing the will of Allah then. So therefore, I am not at fault. I didn't do any sin. I just followed what Allah told me to do.
Allah
I
is
mean,
just willing that Allah gets hurt. That's really strange.
yes. So long story short, don't think so hard.
Yeah. Oh,
As
you
the
know what? That's
Quran
probably
says, if you think too much, you will start to doubt.
hey, you know
That's
what?
really a sign of a bad thing, bad teaching. It's
Oh,
like, don't think about this too much, because if you do, you might start to doubt it.
can can you pull that Quran verse up? Because I just want Muslims to really as we're talking, I want Muslims to really kind of wrestle with that a little bit.
I do not think I have access to it actually right now. My
Because
internet's been funky.
let me see actually if I can, because I just want to
You
read it
grab
word
that
for
word.
it. Every time I see that verse, do not think lest you, because I think it's legitimately. What was it? Is it 49:6? I want to find that one, because every time I see that one, it always makes me laugh.
Well,
The fact
it's
that
just
just
so different
it's one of
compared
the
to
few
what.
times I agree with the Quran. I actually agree with it for once. I'm like, oh, I believe that that's the
This is
only time I see something clearly true.
well, we have that, and then you have the Bible, which says if something is odd or something sounds off, go research it, question it, investigate it. It's like, okay, one
Good
says
riddance.
don't look too closely, the other says examine with a fine-tooth comb. And I've been going through the reliability of the Bible with John on his channel. And we've
Nice.
been hitting different ways of looking at it. And we just talked about textual criticism and all the ins and outs and everything that's been done to it. And one of the points I brought up is this has all been done by Christians to their own book. This critical eye has been done by Christians trying to examine, seeing any sort of discrepancy or any sort of textual variant and pulling it back so we actually know exactly who did this. I said, man, I'd be scared if I was a Christian scholar back in the Middle Ages and I flipped Jesus and Christ back and forth, because that's one of the textual variances is either Christ Jesus or Jesus Christ. It's like, it doesn't really matter one way or the other. It still means the same thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, they still tracked it back and they know exactly when it was altered. Oh, man. That is, yeah, that's kind of scary having your work that critically looked at.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's wild, right? Because it's the issue with discussions with. All right, on John.
There you go.
Hey, nice. Yes, it is. The Bible is reliable. Yes, it is. Also, again, if anybody wants a good set, Jay Warner Wallace's 3-part set here: Forensic Faith, Cold Case Christianity, and God's Crime Scene. All three are really good introductory means of approaching apologetics. And I think also, goodness, I've read this thing so many times. They just have really good diagrams that make some points of textual criticism analysis accessible. Also, yes, according to the prophet Isaiah, the Lord says, come, let us reason together. What is that? It's like Isaiah chapter 1 or something, but really powerful that The true God says, no, let's reason together, you know?
You've got that. You've got, it's just so interesting seeing how the God of the Bible, definitely compared to the Quran, works with humanity. You have the time when this is before the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah in Genesis, and he comes to Abraham, and Abraham's background's merchant. So he's used to haggling and getting down and dirty and like, okay, well, this price or this price, and wiggling it out. And that's something that God, as himself coming in later on, is called Yahweh himself. So we know that is God there. That would be what we believe to be Jesus before the incarnation. And they do a bit of haggling there. It's like, okay, well, will you destroy the city if it's, if you find 10 good men? He says, no, I won't destroy if I find 10. What if you find 3 good men? And he's like, well, I wouldn't destroy for 3 good men. And it goes down, and finally, it's like it was all God's plan to begin with, that was what he was going to do. It's not like it changed his mind at all, but you see that relationship there where
Exactly.
God wants to have that interaction with us. And again, I wouldn't necessarily haggle with God if I saw him in the flesh. That wouldn't be my knee-jerk reaction. But that was Abraham's knee-jerk reaction. And again, he did not know much of the God that he was following. He didn't know the master plan. He didn't know that Jesus was going to come. He didn't know about the future prophets. He didn't know about all these things that we now can look back and we have a much more intimate knowledge of God than what he did. Yet you still have this intimate sort of interaction and just general interaction between him and God, which I still am really impressed by.
Amen.
How God wants to have that relationship with us.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? That there's no need in God, but he does desire that there be some real relationship. And of course, that's the whole point of creation, right? That he might communicate his goodness, his glory, his love to created beings. You compare that to Islam, where Allah just always is behind a veil. I mean, he's always far off, and he never is very clear or personal, and never get this real powerful sense that Allah is truly the most loving, according to what some might say, right? Or the most beautiful. Muslims, no matter how many times I ask Muslims, is Allah beautiful? And they all, I mean, almost without fail, Muslims will say, well, Allah's not beautiful because you can't see him. I'm like, well, there's things that are beautiful that you don't see, right? I think music is beautiful. I don't literally see music notes floating into my eardrums, right? I experience music. I don't see it. I hear it. So beauty is something a bit more profound than just basic sensory experience, even if some of it is brought about by that means. But every time I ask a Muslim if they think Allah is beautiful, then it's just such a confusing and strange response. When I ask a Christian if God is beautiful, they're like, of course. And it's very simple. It's very simple. It's like, well, of course, he is the one who is beautiful. Like he is true beauty, right? He is the fullness of goodness and perfection.
The entire point of humanity's creation in the Bible and the Torah, going even back to the Torah, is for that relationship. And the whole point, again, for God to dwell with his people. That's the point of the tabernacle. That's the point of the temple. He wants to dwell with us, not because he needs something from us, not because he has to have something from us. He is complete upon his own. He wants to have that relationship. He wants to have that sort of coexistence, someone to be there, someone he can show himself to and know completely and be known as well. Again, that's consistent into the New Testament and Jesus' sacrifice on the cross, how that brings us back to that original established position where we were supposed to be to begin with before we decided to screw it all up. So, but you don't see that in the Quran. You don't see that in Islam. You don't see any sort of desire for humanity, any sort of longing for humanity. I mean, the Psalms are very clear about God being a jealous God, that he wants, and that's not like greedy jealousy. It's he desires that relationship. He wants it, and he's willing to do stuff and take steps so that he can obtain it. It's not only it's just like building any sort of relationship. It is not that we are just laying down the bricks ourselves and God's just being fickle, not even caring or anything like that. He is there, already built the bridge. He's just standing there saying, okay, you can walk across now. I did everything. You just need to walk across and you just come to me. That's all you need to do. It says basically, because I knew you couldn't do yourself. So I did it for you. That really is the message of the gospel itself.
Amen.
Is that, but you don't see any of that desire, that longing to be intimate with Allah. He's just not. He's callous. He's fickle. One day he desires, he thinks you're good. The next day, I'll throw you to hell anyway. I mean, it was Abu Bakr who's like, I don't even trust Allah. If I have my right foot in paradise, he might just decide to throw me to hell anyway. No one can escape Allah's deception. And it's like, okay, that was Muhammad's father-in-law. If Muhammad's father-in-law was uncertain about entering into heaven, if I was a Muslim nowadays, I'd have no hope.
I'd be freaked out. I would live every day in fear. You know, like I would not have any assurance of, I guess salvation's not even really a concept, right? Amen. Yes.
Yes.
Look at the Lord. Look at what the Lord says. Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, I will give you rest. And going back to what you were just saying, this constant phrase, one of my favorite phrases in the Bible that you see in the Old Testament throughout and in the New Testament and in Revelation, God says, I will dwell with them and they will be my people and I will be their God. And that's over and over in the prophets in the Old Testament. And it's just this constant phrase, this constant theme, all the way to the end, the very last book of the scripture. And I will dwell with them, and they will be my people, and I will be their God. That is just such a powerful, beautiful phrase. That is a God worth worshiping.
And the concept of the blessed, the whole list of those who are blessed, blessed are those who mourn. Is God getting anything out of that mourning? No. Blessed are those that are mourned, for they will be comforted. By whom? By God. He is offering something without requiring anything in return. He's not requiring that you be happy all the time. He's saying, I'm going to meet you where you are, where you're suffering. I will meet you. When you are broken, I will meet you. You don't have to be perfect because I am perfect enough for you. And that, again, you don't see that in Islam. And it's I mean, tell you truthfully, Allah is terrifying as far as a God that would be, if I would put myself in that position of following a God like that, it would be terrifying. Even if hypothetically Islam was true, I don't think I'd want to follow a God like that because he's fickle. He doesn't care.
I mean, also he would will that we don't follow him because he wills everything as it comes to pass. So we wouldn't even really have a choice in the matter, but I mean, I'll wager all my life on the one that follows all logic, reason, purpose, and everything else. I'll wager my life on the one who gave his life for me. That's a far better bet.
I have actually a short coming up that is one of the biggest differences between Christianity and Islam. And it covers the concept of Muhammad clearly saying over and over again, according to the Hadith, that he does not know what is going to happen to him. And it's in the Quran. He does not know what's going to happen after death. He does not know. I am nothing but a warner. And I go through multiple references in Sahih al-Bukhari about Muhammad not knowing, compared to Jesus saying, I am going to go prepare a place for you. If my Father's house has many rooms, if it was not so, I would tell you. I am going to prepare a place for you. We know, according to that he has not only the authority, well, first of all, he has the knowledge of heaven. He knows what's there. He knows what is going on. On top of that, he has the authority to promise it to his followers. That's not a mere prophet being able to do that. It's not a human that's able to make the promise or know what is going on in heaven. And on top of that, he has the power to change it, to make room for us so that we can go there and be with him. And that's the final section where you can be with me. Again, echoing that consistent theme of God dwelling with us and us with him. So,
but of
that
course,
would be,
despite all of that, despite all that beautiful display that you just described there, you'll get some Muslims in the comments say, but did he split the moon? Did Jesus split the moon? To which we would say, well, he made the moon.
he made the moon. He did it himself.
Yeah,
Yes.
Yeah. He formed the moon. He formed the sun, the moon, and the stars. So sure, yeah. If he wanted to actually split the moon, he could. But
Right. Again, you find that in John 1. Again, that's not written by Paul, which seems to be their biggest, like, oh, we hate Paul. Well, no, this was John, follower of Jesus, who is described multiple times in the Gospels. And he is describing that Jesus is God and that through him all things were made and nothing was made without him. So, yeah, that would include the moon being part of his domain that he then has authority over. And if he wanted to split the moon, there would be some evidence. We could even go back to the plagues of Egypt. There's some evidence that it might have been all caused by a volcano. And some people might look and say, well, then it's not really a miracle now. I say it's a miracle. It happened right then. Holy cow. Talk about some serious planning before the creation of the earth. It's like, oh, I need a volcano right here to blow up and do this. And again, it would be completely within God's character to work within the rules of the universe that he put forth. And at the same time, he is outside of time. So it's not like I have to keep in memory, in 12 or whatever billion years or however long it would be before this event were to occur, I have to make sure that this just happened just right. No, he exists outside of our linear time. Therefore, he doesn't have to deal with messy memories. Like
amen. Yeah. An infinite mind.
God creates, the enemy destroys. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Or just twist the snot out of everything.
Yeah.
Look at how many apocryphal accounts got into the Quran as authoritative words of God. It's like, no.
Islam is so funny. There is like a strange comedy to Islam, and in a weird kind of, I feel bad for all these people that are duped by a demon, obviously, and by a pedophile prophet, but in a weird kind of meta narrative sense, there is something strangely, tragically funny about the Quran, right? This guy doesn't actually know anything well enough to cite it and detail it and explain it. So he cites these weird, mixed matched, perverted, flip-flopped ideas and puts it into the Quran as if it is the case, right? So, 3, why did you tell people to worship me, you, and Mary as gods? And it's like, well, that's not what the Trinity is. And by this time in history, that should have been known, right? Well, then again, that's from Allah's perspective. So that means he eternally got that one wrong. So I keep on forgetting that the Quran is Allah's perspective. So he would have eternally been incorrect about something, which is crazy. I mean, you're the one making this stuff. So how do you get it wrong? Anyways, which is just stupid. I mean, the weight of these mistakes never really seems to click with Muslims because they keep on forgetting the root, the foundation, right? The Quran is the eternal speech of Allah, which means it's in the eternal mind
Well,
of Allah.
try again next year. I'm pretty sure McDonald's has another university. You can probably see about getting that. Oh, yeah, you got Arby's. I prefer Arby's in the end anyway.
There you go. Don't worry, Christian questions. Hey, you keep it up. Keep on applying. Get that degree. Get that flipping degree, or maybe cashier degree, whatever it might be, and you make an entire channel about that. That'll be the degree. That'll prove that Christianity is the truth.
So, yeah, it's crazy once you think of that and how trapped that is. And even the apocryphal accounts that make it into the Quran, the talking, Jesus talking.
Yeah, the clay birds.
Clay birds. Why?
Yeah.
There's no reason why. And there's other parts of that, the apocryphal accounts, Jesus turning the kids into goats so they could dance around and him having fun and then turning them back willy-nilly. It's like, okay, that's not consistent with the character of God that is shown in the Bible, in the Gospels, and in the Old Testament. It is completely alien to him. It's more akin to Allah being so fickle, just like, I'm bored today, so I'm just going to turn a bunch of kids into goats. Why not? Another one is whenever he goes, and another apocryphal account was whenever Jesus goes and turns all the cloth into a certain color, just dips it all, and then it's like, well, I'll just change into whatever color you want. And it's like, okay, so you're just covering up your mistakes now? So you screwed up, and now you're covering up. Are you? Yeah, no. This is what Muhammad had access to. This is what he was listening to, these apocryphal accounts that were going on in that area, and he couldn't tell the difference because he did not know God. He did not know that character, the character of God, to be able to just make the simple determination, say, no, that's not the character. God is consistent in every single thing he does in the Bible and in the Torah, and he is a consistent character throughout all space and all time. That's not him. And the same way we can look at the Quran and say, that's not our God, because it's not the same.
Now, maybe there's a chance that there actually are Muslims listening or watching, or later on, that the ones that are watching this video who are thinking, well, now I've actually come to understand that the moon splitting is nonsense, right? And I have to interpret that symbolically. So I have to get rid of the eyewitness accounts from the Hadiths. But then if I interpret that symbolically, I have to get rid of the literal interpretation of the Quran. So then Islam falls apart. What's the next step now? What could we tell a Muslim who actually wants to change their mind?
So, real quick question here. That was the is it the Gospel of Baby Jesus? I forget if that's the one that's called. I forget his exact name. But that's where you have all those accounts of Jesus doing things when he was a kid that make no sense at all. Because again, every miracle that Jesus did always pointed to his deity and the message of the cross itself. He was very focused on getting that done. It's almost like he's planned it for a little bit of time, right? Almost as if he's thought this through. Instead, you get a very fickle individual in those apocryphal accounts.
Yeah, that's like one of the infancy narratives of Thomas or whatever, right?
Infancy gospel is what it is.
Yeah, and I think there's like a couple other ones, but that's the only one I've heard of.
That's the one that he would have had access to at the time, and the one that we see very prominently in this, as well as the the Romance of Alexander the Great, Dul Carnain. That's almost word for word. Like, dude, you literally just copied and pasted this over. You just, in your travels, when you were a merchant, you heard about this, you understood it, and then you just came back to the people that knew nothing about it and sold them a bunch of goods, claiming it all to be you. And it's very clear that that never historically happened at all. And there have been Muslims who have left Islam just because they read the original document and be like, man, this is just, it's absolute plagiarism. So, okay, so you were saying about the Muslims who might be looking at this. The main thing I would have to say to them is there's a God that loves you, that values you, that wants to have a relationship with you, that cares about every struggle you went through because he knows those struggles himself. And he was willing to go through them himself in order to offer to you just the opportunity to have that relationship. I cannot stress that enough. He was willing to sacrifice everything just to give you the opportunity to turn towards him. Now, no guarantee on your behalf at that time. So that is the God who loves you and wants to be with you and wants to see you.
Amen.
That's who I'd encourage you to come to get to know. I would
That's right.
recommend that you read the sources that we've given you. I'd recommend, they keep saying in a lot of those videos where I start by reading the Quran, they're saying, you're just taking this out of context, or you should read the whole thing. I'm like, dude, I read the whole thing. It makes it worse. I read the commentaries. It makes it worse. You don't want me to read more of your stuff because it does not give this it does not show this in a good light. I want you to read more. I want you to actually read what the Quran says. I've had a Muslim who's an ex-Muslim now that I was talking to one time, and he said, well, what are some of your issues with the Quran? And I go through a couple of them, and one of them was that the Quran calls all Christians and Jews the worst of creatures. And he says, no, you're lying. That's not in there. Well, I pulled it up and showed him, and yes, it does say that in there. And he had the hardest time with that, and that was one of the things I said, no, it can't be true because of this stuff. And he was a firm believer in that. So, yeah, it's read your sources, read the Bible. Please, for the love of all humanity, just stop telling us you know everything about Christianity if you've never picked up a Bible. I can respect your opinions more if you pick up the Bible and actually read it and actually be able to show us this instead of just copying and pasting arguments you've heard from someone else. The major issue with those sort of arguments that you guys are using, where you're just copying and pasting for other people, is as soon as I push you on them, they're only skin deep because you do not have the actual source. You're not the source of it. You've just heard it from someone and you take it as if it was 100% true. You know, where Muhammad is in the Bible, right? Okay, let's actually read it. Let's look through it. Oh, that's talking about the Holy Spirit. Well, it can't be necessarily the Holy Spirit. It's got to be Muhammad. And it's like, no, Muhammad was never eternally there. He was never known by the followers of Jesus. Even from a secular standpoint, that's impossible. Even from a Muslim standpoint, that makes no sense in Islam because he was still, as Muhammad said repeatedly, he was only a warner. He was just a prophet. He was just a messenger. He was just human. The comforter is someone who is there till the end of the age, who was there and known by them. The world could not see him because they did not know him. That does not describe Muhammad. That describes the Holy Spirit only. And if you guys read the entire thing, you'll get that context. Please understand. And when you claim, oh, Jesus never claimed to be God, he only claimed to be a son of man over and over again. He was trying to be very clear about this. It's like, no, read the context, understand what you're talking about. When he's referring to that, he's referring to Daniel chapter 7. So go back, read it, and then understand the context of what he is saying. He is claiming to be God every time he does that. So I guess to any Muslim who is struggling with this, please read. Please just read.
That's all you got to do. It's very simple. And when you read the Bible, don't read just to memorize, but read to understand. Right? In Islam, you're taught to recite. But no. In Christianity, we want you to understand, to reason, to learn, and to come to a knowledge of Christ. What does this person say? On NASA and the moon split.
Yeah,
She puts on
just
the
pulling it
website
back.
by stats and spread. Nice. There we go.
They
Look, you
specifically
see.
deny it. They say, no, this never, we are not supporting it. Stop telling everyone we support it.
It's funny
Hilarious.
because like Muslims are always stuck in claims that don't really work together, right? Some will say, oh, well, right after the issue is that right after he split the moon, then he sealed it right back up. And then we're like, oh, so then he sealed it perfectly because, he wouldn't have left cracks, right? Allah wouldn't have left cracks. He would have sealed it perfectly, so we wouldn't have noticed. And they're
Well,
like, exactly,
actually,
yes. He would not have left a seal.
The Quran doesn't say he put it back together.
That's true.
It just
That
kind of
is
leaves
true.
it. The Quran says it just split, and that's it.
That's
The
it.
Hadith are the ones that later on say, oh, yeah, he put it back together. That's why we don't see anything.
Yeah.
Because
But then
if
if people say that the Hadiths say that they were put back together, then that means that we would expect there to be no cracks because Allah would do it perfectly so that there's no cracks, which defeats the Muslims' whole point of citing, trying to point out the little cracks, right? So then their whole entire argument falls apart no matter which way they go with it, because then they'd have to say, oh, Allah put it back together, but imperfectly. So there's cracks now. I'm like, wow, he made a mistake. Good for him.
So we actually have a super chat here that says there is an miracle, okay, astronomical miracle from the Hadith in response to your Twitter announcement. So I made that announcement. Fantastic. If you'd like to come up here, I'll post it. It's about ready to wrap up, actually. I already did a last call on that. But if I'll give you a little bit of time to respond to this because I would love to hear your arguments and I'd love to see your perspective. I just put in the comment in the live chat there the link to join us. Go ahead and click on that. Come up here, give your argument. I will allow you some time just to present what you have to say about it, as long as it is on topic, and then we can have an open dialogue from there. It says the only witness is a Muslim in India. No, we actually covered that. That the king in southern India that they keep referring to. I'm not going to try to say the dynasty because I would just butcher the snot out of the name and no one would know what I'm talking about anyway. No one knows exactly when he lived. He's part of a legend that not even Indian historians who really like this even agree that this is something that's historically true. They just believe that it is basically a general myth about this, just sort of like hints that of historical things that may have happened. But even if he did exist, the dynasty that he would have been associated with, the rulers, lived between the 8th and the 12th century AD. Over 100 to 500 years after Muhammad's death. So a bit inconsistent there with making that claim as far as that being someone that actually saw it, although that is constantly cited by Muslims, which then I'm like, guys, just realize what's going on here.
I found the comment that the person was referring to. They said it was a reply in your Twitter feed, so I went to it and I found the reply, and it is hilarious.
Oh boy.
This is actually one of the funniest memes I've seen in a while. This is art.
Second here, let me share. Nope. Okay. Share this one instead. Okay. Should be right here.
This actually might be a good way to end it because this is kind of art.
Go ahead. I'll let you take it.
The comment before that, it says, not the moon. Here is another astronomical miracle claimed in the Hadiths and proven by science. The eyes are the leather strap of the anus. So according to Astronomy News, planetary scientists discover eye of Uranus composed of leather straps. Scientists investigating Uranus were shocked to discover that its composition was miraculously foretold by an ancient Islamic hadith. The eye is composed entirely of leather straps. This
is great.
This is actually amazing. The eyes are the leather strap of Uranus. Oh man, that makes so much sense.
Fantastic. So credit to you. Fantastic. That's a great one to pull up. I think that has beat all the comments that have been on those two videos combined.
That's art.
The original videos, and there are thousands on them. And that right there kicked the snot out of all of them. So thank you guys for joining us. There is a special thank you. I must give credit where credit is due. A special thank you to our members on Buy Me a Coffee, that is Sherwin. On YouTube, we have Cheeky Shiki, Solitary Emmy, Professor Yaffle, Reasoned Answers, Sir Dr. Whitemeat, J Mongoose, Learning to Live, Ex-Muslim Testimonies, Breakfast Gun, Jesus Loves You, Jeff Chapman, Sky Apologetics, Jack Ray, Sola Gracia, James is Tired, Dana Casson, Francis Bowe. Thank you. If you would like to join them in contributing to this content, go ahead and click the join button. And also, don't forget to share this video and like it. Do not forget that Jesus Christ is the only way, the truth, and the life. There is no way into heaven except through the blood of the cross. This gift that is freely given to anyone who asks. We are all equal at the foot of the cross. May the Lord guide you and bless you in all that you do. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.